Yep. Today we're going to be talking about thyroid. Hopefully not a short class. I had to, at some point, I had to stop what I was doing and get the actual screen ready. And I probably wanted to get a couple pages further along. But that's all right. You know, if it ends up being a short day, it's a short day. It just means that your Friday will be a long day, if that's the case. So, the thyroid gland. Most of you guys have seen this, and gosh, remember, I don't know how many of you saw Mike's thyroid, but he had one of the most dramatic as in visually dramatic, just like, wow. You know, I looked at that, I said, question about it, and what was I going to say? Sorry, Nana just interrupted my train of thought here. One of the most dramatic appearances of thyroiditis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, I've ever seen. But it was a good example if you guys saw that. But we're not going to quite get to thyroiditis today. We're going to talk today about 2 minutes of embryology. That's all we need to take. And then a little bit, let's see, we're going to go along a little bit on the anatomy. And it's not too hard. Anatomy is not too hard on this. Actually, no, I take that back. The anatomy of the thyroid isn't that hard. It's the muscles and the stuff around the thyroid. That's actually the difficult part. Well, let's see, we'll look at some normals, some abnormals, some developmental anomalies, a little bit of physiology, and a little bit of testing, yeah, getting into solid lesions. And by the way, half of you are going to have something. Maybe a little bit less than half. You're a pretty young crowd. If you were all my age, then half to 75% of you would have something on the thyroid, because it's very, very common. So don't freak out when we get back to class and we find a cyst or something on your thyroid. Unless you're JP and you haven't had that tested yet. That was a good size. All right, thyroid gland embryology. All I'm going to say about the embryology, let's see, yep, is that it starts, the first cells, let's see, the cells differentiate at base of tongue. So your thyroid starts off right there in the base of the tongue, kind of a little more sublingual, but and then they migrate to the anterior neck. Can someone text Nana and tell her I'm teaching a class right now? Cells differentiate at the base of the tongue. So early on in embryology, what is that? Oh, that's like the third gestational week. Let's write that thing. Third gestational. I guess I can use a little more room over here, couldn't I? There we go. Look at that. Third gestational week. That's when the cells start to become the future thyroid. And then they migrate. I think that was in the 5th week, but anytime we got migration of cells, anterior neck. Anytime we get a migration, we get mistakes. So you get a migrating, the head of the pancreas migrates. Sometimes it makes a mistake and it goes around the duodenum. It actually closes off the duodenum, strangulates it. a migration of the testicles from the abdomen to the outside. That doesn't always occur correctly. Migration of the kidney from the pelvis up to its normal renal fossa. That doesn't always occur correctly. Sometimes it stays in the pelvis. Sometimes the right kidney or the left kidney goes to the wrong side. And the same things could happen in the thyroid. So we could have some ectopic tissue, and we have some cysts left behind. It travels down, let's see, travels down so-called the thyroglossal duct. And so that's where we're going to find some issues in this so-called thyroglossal duct. You and I shouldn't have a thyroglossal duct anymore. It should be, what's it called? Annihilated. It will be annihilated. It'll go away. I can't think of the correct term for that, but anyhow. And that's pretty much all I got to mention for embryology, is that starts at the base of the tongue and migrates. So now let's look at basic anatomy of the thyroid gland and a little bit of the surrounding features. Let's do it right there. So obviously this butterfly-shaped thing is the thyroid itself. We could see that there is a bridge of tissue. An isthmus is a sort of a bridge. Like if there is an island off the coast of a continent, but that island is connected by a stretch of land, that stretch of land is called an isthmus. So that's what this is right here. And of course, we have a right and left lobe as well. Each of these lobes travel up to about the thyroid cartilage. This is your Adam's apple. It's called Adam's apple because men have a larger thyroid cartilage because of testosterone, and that's why our voices sound different than women's. Well, not because of the entire voice box being larger. We have generally have deeper voices, but that's the Adam's apple. Let's continue on with non-thyroid tissues. We have the cricoid cartilage, and then all of the cartilaginous rings that go around. And we will see those. Cartilage is not like bone. Well, it's an ultrasound is not like bone because it is hypoechoic. And so we will see these hypoechoic rings on our ultrasound exam. Anterior to an echogenic, because what's echogenic is the trachea itself. These rings, these cartilaginous rings, travel around the trachea, not 100% around. They kind of like a they go around 70, 80, 90%. They're not connected in the back. Well, that's kind of important. If you swallow a large item, you bite off a piece of meat that's too big, you're going to need to have your I'm getting my things confused here, but actually no, that is actually true. The esophagus is sitting behind the trachea. As food goes down the esophagus, it has to allow room to push into the trachea. So that's part of the reason why these are rings that go 75% of the way around, not all the way around. Okay, as we come up, we already mentioned the thyroid cartilage or Adam's apple. The hyoid bone is this yellow guy up here. Be aware that sometimes you can see the greater horn of the hyoid bone going off the side of the neck. Well, anterior lateral part of the neck, because sometimes we're scanning up that high and suddenly you see this echogenic thing like pointing out, and you're like, wait a minute, what is that? I remember the first time I saw that, I was very confused. I didn't know how to describe it, and the doctor was like, yeah, we found the hyoid, congratulations. But you have to be aware that that is there. Let's see. Kind of a cut-off view here. We see our isthmus has a thickness. We will, of course, measure that thickness. Speaking of measurements, we measure the length. So right lobe, superior to inferior, we're going to measure the length there. We're going to measure the width of the right lobe. And so that's going to be kind of here to, we're going to kind of guesstimate at this end where we want to end our measurement. It's not terribly important. If you're a couple of millimeters off in either direction, don't worry about it. But that's our width. And then let's see width. Oh, height. So going to this dimension, we're looking at this differently. If this again was width, what I measured over here, then height would be kind of, that's more of our AP. We'll do a better image of the height, because that's kind of a hard picture to understand the measurement there. Let's get some of this other junk out of here. I don't know what I just did. Okay. Okay. Now the thyroid is fed by 4 arteries. 2 of these you've already heard of. At least I hope you heard. We did talk about them when we were talking about doing a carotid artery. And generally, it is the first artery that comes off of the external carotid artery, the ECA. That first artery is the superior thyroid artery. In fact, it's the only branch of the ECA that I even really mentioned. There's other branches, there's a facial artery and stuff like that, but I think this is the only one we really need to know about. So superior thyroid artery, and then there's an inferior, of course, obviously that's on both sides, and then an inferior thyroid artery, which comes off of the subclavian. So subclavian comes up, and this is, sometimes we do see this. It'll come up and go into the thyroid. Thyroid IMA artery, and medial artery, question mark. Not in the book. Let's not even worry about the IMA artery, but you know what? I am going to look at that up in my own time. These are the ones we want to worry about. Superior and inferior thyroid arteries. First off the ECA, second off of the subclavian. All right. Do I go into... All right, in trying to stay in order of the book, let me just jump down to here, because I believe that's how my notes go. Not sure how I got this out of order on my page. So I mentioned there is a, let me see something. I'm in the wrong. No, that's fine. I mentioned that a couple of mistakes can happen because of the migration from the base of the tongue down to the anterior neck, anterior to in the region of the Adam's apple here, just below it, anterior to the esophagus and trachea. And there is a thyroglostic duct, thyroglossic duct that travels down, 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 down until it actually came down to here. And sometimes just a little bit of tissue got left behind. We're going to call that the pyramidal lobe. Now these tend to be really thin. Honestly, we probably miss them most of the time. If you're not really paying attention, you're not looking for it, you will miss it. Now, I didn't get a lot of good images on ultrasound of what this looks like. And in fact, you don't really know your ultrasound, thyroid ultrasound walnut to really understand what we're seeing here. But basically, the thyroid on this person is back down here. And what we're showing is a sagittal midline view. Sagittal midline view, and this little point is coming up. So this is, okay, I see what they're saying. Right here is the true isthmus, the true connection between the two lobes, and up here is this kind of accessory tissue, this pyramidal lobe is up there. The other possibility, do I have it here? Well, we're going to mention later, but instead of a pyramidal lobe, you could have all the tissue is not in there, but you could end out with a cyst right dead center. That's a thyroglossal duct cyst. Well, we talk about that in a moment. We mentioned the other problem with migration, and that is ectopic tissue. Now, it's usually not the whole thyroid. It's usually just a little bit of thyroid. And here we have a thyroid right on this kid's really gross tongue. He's got a bit of a, what you can see is his tonsils over here as well. But let's see, ectopics, back of tongue, sublingual is a possible, pre-laryngeal, in other words, it was traveling and just didn't make it. Some of them could actually go into the trachea, which is a little weird. And then some of them can overshoot and go substernal. We, as sonographers, are very unlikely, maybe the pre-laryngeal. We might find it up there. But it is very unlikely. We could, if we knew where to look and we were thinking that it might be there. If someone told us, hey, there's something up there, we could find it sublingual, pre-laryngeal. We're not going to find it substernal because that's a bone you don't see back there. And unless they open their mouth and say, ah, we're not going to find this either. Okay, so the other possibilities, let me go ahead and just write it down here. Or, yeah, I'm just going to write a couple things here. Athyrosis. So thyroid's kind of an important thing. However, you could easily have your thyroid removed and simply take the hormones for the rest of your life. And it's very easy, as long as you don't forget to take your hormones every day. Not a big problem. If, however, you were born without a thyroid, so athyrosis would be born without a thyroid, or or there's some kind of early on thyroiditis that destroys the thyroid, uh, the child will grow. It'll be slow growth and slow mental growth as well. There was a term for it. Cretinism. So cretinism, you know, and I've heard that used against people all the time. Well, not all the time, but I've heard it used. But cretinism is really athyrosis, and so you have slow, retarded growth, slow mental growth as well. However, if you don't have a thyroid and you are an adult, it's not going to slow your mental growth. But if you don't have thyroid hormone, it will cause all sorts of problems. And the other possibilities is that you have a thyroid without an isthmus, or you have a single lobe thyroid, so a right lobe or left lobe only thyroid. Those are a couple of them. Or you have one big monolobe that both the right and left are considered really one giant lobe, with the isthmus is not even existent. One page of notes down. Okay, so now we get back to, this could be a bit tricky, and it's really just a matter of taking our time. Let's look at this drawing first. Oh, by the way, here's my thyroglossal duct cyst over there. Like I said, we'll get into that in a moment. Okay. So, yeah, I guess it's pretty accurate for a drawing. All right, thyroid, right here. Right lobe, left lobe, isthmus. Trachea here with the ring of cartilage. Thank you, Kurt. Ring of cartilage around the front, but not along the back. And like I said a little bit ineloquently before, if you eat a large item, it is actually able to impinge upon the trachea. If this were a solid ring all the way across, you'd be more likely to choke on larger items. So that is one reason why we have a ring like that. For us, when the patient is lying down, I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, the esophagus slides off to the patient's left. And so sometimes we'll see it down there and you'd be like, what is that? And it's just an esophagus, usually off to the left. Now, we need to know a little bit about muscles here. Let's get a better, that's a pretty color right there. These are better known as the, I don't know, infrahyoid muscles. These are actually known as the strap muscles. I am zoomed in a little bit too close. That is the sternohyoid. And by the way, they're named sternohyoid. It means that one end is connected to your sternum, the other is connected to your hyoid. That bone that I said will be sticking out, and you'll wonder, what is that little echogenic bone-like structure? It's the hyoid. It's the top of your voice box. So the sternohyoid is the one most anterior. Sternothyroid, now it's not connected to your thyroid. It goes through your sternum to a thyroid cartilage, actually, there. And then the omohyoid, and this one's really weird. Not 100% sure why, what the ulmo is part. It actually goes anterior to your neck from the hyoid bone, and it's going to come down and then go way off to the side and actually connect all the way back to, I believe, your clavicle, all the way, like all the way to the back. It's very strange how this, the direction of this goes. But that's the omohyoid. So sternohyoid, sternothyroid, omohyoid. In general, most technologists, the vast majority, don't know the three of these. They can't tell them apart, or they can't remember which one is which. And that, I include myself in that. I don't sit there and say, oh, all the omohyoid. No, I just know them all as strap muscles. And in fact, on this picture right here, this is all three of them together. And you can see that sometimes it's actually even hard to tell that there's three. It's like one, and I don't even know the difference here between the sternothyroid and the omohyoid. So these are our strap muscles. The more important one, and this is, oh, it's right. You guys know all about the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Also, it's SCM, sternocleidomastoid. Remember, guys, when we were doing our carotid exams, I was having you come up, and then almost everyone's carotid, right about at the, just beyond the bulb, it just got ugly. Well, that's because the sternocleidomastoid moved off to the side and it was no longer acting as a window for us. So what I would say is take your transducer, move it off to the side more. Whoop. Well, okay, that's my transducer. And by going off to the side, we're using this as a window and looking down to the carotid artery. So that is usually pretty far away from the thyroid, and you can see it's not exactly in the middle of our picture here, but it is the largest muscle, and that one you should know. You should always know which is the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Let's see. Ooh, and let's see. What about this one? Longest Coley muscle. That is, well, kind of really like a laying down, like almost like a leaf here on sideways. But I think reality is we don't see it so leafy. Let's look at down here. So we're not seeing it great, but here on that side, this side is just a little bit too shadowed out to see. But sometimes people will note a mass underneath the left or the right lobe, and it's not a mass. It is the longest Coley muscle. So that's another one you need to know, even though this image is not showing it very well. Well, let's look at this. Let's go back to this. So sternocleidomastoid off in the corner here. CCA. On this person, the CCA is pretty much directly lateral of the right lobe and a little bit inferior lateral to the left lobe. Oh, look at the difference in size. This is very common. The left lobe is a little bit smaller than the right. And there's different shapes to these as well. We have our beautiful isthmus here. We can measure from, we could do an anterior posterior measurement there of the isthmus. We could do a left lobe. And on this one, I don't care if you measure anterior posterior. That would be height. I don't care if you do it in transverse like this picture or sagittal. Kind of doesn't matter, but clearly it's a little bit different size between left and right, and that's completely normal. Anterior, posterior. Oh, and of course, you definitely, though, will measure the width of each lobe here as well. Let's see, what else? What else? Okay, probably about it for that. Let's look at these pictures. Or this picture, I should say. So this technologist has slid the transducer to the side. But I want to see one thing up here. So I got this picture, this one up here, and I have another one. And I don't know how they got so much of the thyroid. Either this is a child and doesn't really look like a child to me, or they might have used a panoramic view. But anyway, well, in any case, this picture, the transducer is transverse. Of course, you know, always right and left. So they've slid to the right. They're looking at the right lobe of the thyroid gland. This looks about mid lobe, so you could definitely measure across. CCA on this person is directly lateral. Sometimes it's a little lower. Sternocleidomastoid muscle. Isthmus coming up here. There, of course, would be more of it, then it's going to come down to the other side. There. This makes it difficult to say where the end of the thyroid is. My first impression is right there, because this just doesn't look like thyroid, but if it's not thyroid, what is it? I guess I'd have to see this patient live, because the other option is to measure from here to here, which might be too much. Interesting. Don't know what to say on that. Let's look at these two guys. Okay. Beautiful picture of a thyroid. Nice isthmus, right lobe, left lobe, very homogeneous. Probably a younger person, because by the time we're older, most of us have something going on in the thyroid. See a little bit of esophagus over on this side, just a little bit. CCA, CCA. Of course, we have artifact, reverb artifact. Oh, this is great, okay. This is the beginning of the trachea here. And that's a layer of air. And of course, boing, 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 reflect another and another. And yeah, actually this one, on that last one, that's really cool. You could actually see the echogenic line. Let's get rid of a couple of these. Echogenic line, and then the hypoechoic above it. You can actually see that in there. But all this, just remember, when you're looking at air, whether it's healthy lungs or a trachea, all of this is fake. There's nothing real in there, because it's basically a total reflection of sound at the air interface. By the way, this is the cartilage. I'm having the hardest time remembering the word cartilage today. It's always something. This is the ring of cartilage right here. And it's hypoechoic. Some strap muscles here. Okay, so once again, beautiful. Oh, and this is also not uncommon. And so it makes you wonder, all right, because the gland's doing this. Whoop, can't draw straight. Gland's doing that, and so, you know, the question is where do you measure it? Well, I think most people would say you measure it here. Same thing on this side, seems to come out and do that, so you probably measure like that. I guess the difference would be if only a little bit of tissue, let's say it came down and then like that, you know, but just pretend like that wasn't there. Then if it's a very thin, and then you're really going to measure from here to here, that might be artificially large. I'd probably measure across there. But in this case, in this picture, I would measure the whole thing. Okay. And finally, we got a sagittal picture. So this is superior and inferior. See a little bit of vertebrae here. Length would be measured across there. And like I said, if you want to measure anterior posterior from this perspective, I'm fine with that. The reason I'm fine with it, first of all, there's nothing wrong with it, but one reason I'm fine with it is because, as you saw in that other picture, sometimes a transverse image doesn't tell you the whole story. Perhaps on that other picture, remember, you know, in fact, let me go back to it real quick. I just couldn't figure out. Yeah, there it is. This might be this. No, it's probably not. I couldn't figure out what this was. What happened to what's going on here? I couldn't figure this out down here. Because this looks like, you know, that looks like thyroid. And certainly my first impression was, well, there's a thyroid. How do I explain all that down there? This is how I explain it. And this is the difference between doing a live scan, and you can see this for yourself while you're scanning, and then looking at a single picture and trying to figure it out. That's basically what we're looking at right there. So that's some, longus colli muscle. Longus colli muscle. The LCM is doing that. And like I told you, sometimes you find echogenicities in the middle of muscle. That's connective tissue. So that's probably what it was on the other screen. Yeah. And so someone was taking a picture right there in transverse. And so we saw nice, beautiful from here to here tissue, and not there. Well, that's another reason why I'm not particularly keen on doing the anterior posterior in a transverse plane, because I feel like in the sagittal plane you get the true deepest measurement. You know where the deepest measurement is. Mystery solved. I love that. I love solving mysteries. That is why I really love being a sonographer, because everything we do is a mystery. Sticking to my table again. Let's see, 141. Oh shit, this is going to be a short day. We gotta go over physiology, and then we could do physiology. Physiology. Where is my physiology? I started writing some stuff down because I knew it would be painful to watch me write it. BMR, the basal metabolic rate. I think I need to go back to my regular color. The basal metabolic rate. That is what the thyroid does. If you are hypothyroid, you are probably a little heavy. If you are hyperthyroid, you are probably a little skinny. So the thyroid hormones, they help control oxygen consumption and how well we exchange oxygen with carbon dioxide. Get me started on carbon dioxide. And protein, carbs as in sugars, lipid as in fats, vitamins as in vitamins, metabolism of those, proteins, carbs, lipids, and vitamins, metabolism. Physical growth and mental growth and maturation are all controlled by thyroid hormones. And the first thyroid hormone we'll talk about is the tri-I, two I's in a row. How often do you see that? I-O, O-I-N-E. Triiodothyronine. Also thankfully known as T3. This one is the more potent. We have two classic iodine-containing thyroid hormones. By the way, we have to have iodine in our diet for our thyroid. Of the two, the T3 is the more potent, and it's also in much lower amounts normally. And then we have the thyroxine, and that is T4. That is less potent, but many, many more times more plentiful. Less potent, more plentiful. These two, let's see, I can probably aim it right here. What these do, this is basically a lock and key, as many hormones are. They, how did I say it? How did I say it? Just bonds, yeah. They just simply, they bond to target cells, and they force those cells to to increase metabolism or increase O2 consumption. So that's how most hormones work. They bind to certain receptors on the cells. Once that receptor is bound by T3 or T4, it tells the cell, oh, okay, we're gonna do more. We're gonna do more work. We're gonna work harder. We're gonna increase our heart rate or whatever, and increase the basal metabolic rate. But then when basal metabolic rate goes up, once again we have another negative feedback mechanism. All right, so the third is a little bit different. Calcitonin. So kind of, you know, these guys are really your basal metabolic rates. Calcitonin, well, that just has something to do with your calcium. And it actually lowers blood calcium by lowers blood calcium by keeping calcium in the bones. So it has, you know, so in bones, just as a quick reminder, probably learned in A&P, there are osteoclasts and osteoblasts. And I think the osteoclasts build bone, or the other way around. I forget which one's which, but it doesn't matter. I'm not a bone scientist. Osteoclasts and osteoblasts, they constantly are reforming your bone. One of them destroys bone, kind of dissolves it. The other one comes right behind and builds it. Calcitonin helps to control that process. All right, let's just quickly talk about the feedback mechanism. Give you guys a break after that. I drew this really small, all right. Okay, where do I want to start? Well, let's start up here in the brain, in the hypothalamus. Oh, I can't draw behind that. That's what the problem is. Why can't I draw behind that? Makes no sense. Okay. Well, I guess I just got to be careful where I put my arrows. All right. Why can't I? I'm sorry. That just kind of threw me off there. The brain in the hypothalamus, and if we'll just quickly zoom in, just as a reminder, I still zoomed in a little too much. Well, if I find my brain, no, I found my brain. Hypothalamus, that structure right there. Pituitary gland, this structure right here. Hypothalamus is going to create TRH, and I definitely need to move back. Thyrotropin releasing hormones. So that is thyrotropin releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus, which goes down to the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, that gives us our TSH, a little more known amongst most people, and that is the thyroid stimulating hormone. And of course, a thyroid stimulating hormone is, lo and behold, it is going to stimulate the thyroid, which apparently, once again, I can't draw behind that. Or in front of that, I should say. That's okay. The thyroid from thyroid stimulating hormone is going to create its T3, T4. It's going to increase the basal metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate goes up. The body senses that. And this guy has a high rate. This guy has a slow rate. The body senses an increase in the BMR, and then it reduces, or once again, the thyrotropin releasing hormone is now reduced. Therefore, the TSH is reduced. Therefore, T3, T4 is reduced. Therefore, BMR goes down. Then the body says, oh, your basal metabolic rate is down. Now we're going to raise thyrotropin releasing hormone and rate. So it's just one big non-stop, round the clock, every day of your life, negative feedback system. Okay. So when we get back, a little bit out of, I don't like the order, but hey, not me, the book. When we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about scanning, although I kind of feel like we already did. A little bit about cysts of the thyroid, and we start to get into nodules. And I suspect it'll be a slightly short day, but not too short, which is probably good. All right, so well, it's 10 till, oh, well, I mean 8 minutes till the top of the hour. So we're not going to wait too long. How about 10 minutes after 2, 2:10. We will see you again at 2:10.